Good evening. I have two questions for you. Do you know what an LVAD is, and do you know anybody who has an LVAD? An LVAD stands for a left ventricular assist/aid device. It can go by either name, but most people know it as a left ventricular aid device. In the 1960s, Dr. DeBakey first started working on the first LVAD, and in 1966, April 21st, he had his first successful transplant in Houston, Texas at the Methodist Hospital. The LVAD comes with a lot of cons, but there's one very big pro that comes out of getting it, and that is it can prolong your life up to 10 years. That's on the upside. The low side is it normally lasts probably about 2 to 5 years. I personally haven't heard anybody who has lived past 7 years with the LVAD, but you can live up to 10. The LVAD pumps blood from your heart into your veins and vice versa when your heart constantly keeps failing. I have personal experience, and I know somebody with an LVAD. My grandfather had it for 5 years exactly until he passed away in 2015. Some of the cons that come with the LVAD is if you like doing things that deal with water, you can't, because the LVAD is a tube that goes inside of your stomach up to your heart. So if that gets wet, I'm sure you can see why that would be a problem. So for example, my grandfather had to give up fishing. That was his passion, his hobby, that was his life. He loved it, but sadly he had to give that up. Also, when it comes to showering, they do have a pack you can secure your wires and bandage with to take showers, but my grandmother just gave my grandfather a sponge bath. They thought it was easier, so there was that. Also, another con is the LVAD runs on electricity, so batteries. And my grandfather had to carry around a lunchbox that had 4 sets of batteries in them. So when the batteries that he had went in, if they were dying, he could just grab them out of his lunch pouch. The batteries can last up to 14 hours, but when they're starting to die, your LVAD will start beeping very, very loud and continuous. So there's no way you can miss it. Now you might be asking, well, what about nighttime? Do you have to wake up in the middle of the night and change them, etc., etc.? No, you don't. For example, my grandfather took his batteries out and plugged up to a machine that sat on his dresser, so at nighttime, and it fed electricity to the LVAD to help it, work throughout the night, so he didn't have to keep stopping and changing batteries and waking up. I don't know how much those cost, but I'm sure they're probably pricey, just because that's how life is. Let's see. Really the only pro that comes out of this is it extending your life. Now, the person who needs to get the LVAD, it takes a very big toll on them. It's a very huge risk. Going under anesthesia just to get the initial transplant is the biggest part, where you could obviously die if your heart is already failing and they have to put you to sleep. You can see why that's the most dangerous part. After you get your LVAD, you have to wait 3 to 4 months before you can just do anything. You can still do day-to-day things, like if you like hiking, if you like walking, if you like shooting guns, I don't know, you can still do all of those things. You just can't do any heavy lifting, which was another downside to my grandfather, because he loved working out in his barn and he just wasn't able to lift things anymore, and it kind of made him feel less of who he was. But he went through all of those cons just so he could make everybody else happy, like my grandmother, our family, friends. We all didn't want him to go, so he went through all of these struggles so we could spend more time with him. So that is a very big, I guess that's a huge favor for us to ask them to do, especially since they're the ones that have to go through it. And the medical bills, believe me, those add up, especially nowadays with how Medicare and stuff works. They add up, so that's a risk you have to take as well. But in the end run, the LVAD can prolong your life, and it will prolong your life. It's supposed to prolong your life until you can get a transplant. You can get another heart. Sadly, my grandfather wasn't an applicant for a new heart just because of he had diabetes, and they won't let you do that if you have like problems like that. So that's what the LVAD is for. It's supposed to prolong your life until you can get another heart. But a lot of people don't get new hearts, so they just live however many years the doctors let them, or tell them they will. So hopefully you gain some knowledge on what the LVAD is and some of the pros and cons. And if you know somebody who's thinking about getting the LVAD, or somebody who has the LVAD, well, you have some experience on your decisions. Thank you.